I inserted my key into the lock, but it wouldn't turn. 3 attempts later, exhaustion giving way to confusion, I finally noticed the scratches around the keyhole. Someone had changed the locks on my own damn house while I was away on business. "Richard?" I called out, dropping my suitcase to pound on the door. No answer. Just the hollow echo of my fist against wood and the distant barking of the neighbor's dog. 2 weeks of back-to-back meetings dissolved into this surreal moment, standing locked out of my life like a stranger. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I dialed Richard's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. With growing urgency, I called our landline. Nothing. A text to Richard. "I'm home. Why are the locks changed?" No reply. I circled around to the back of the house, tripping over a garden hose in my rush. The kitchen door was locked too, but through the window, I could see nothing. The breakfast nook where our antique table had stood for 8 years was empty. My coffee mug collection that had cluttered the open shelving was gone. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my face against the glass, scanning what little I could see of our home. Our empty home. With trembling fingers, I found the spare key we'd hidden years ago in the fake rock by the rose bushes. It still worked. The door swung open to reveal a kitchen stripped bare except for the major appliances. No microwave. No toaster. No blender that Richard had gifted me last Christmas. "Richard?" I called again, voice cracking. "Emma? Jake?" Our children's names echoed through the empty space. My heels clicked against hardwood floors as I moved through the house in a daze. The living room, empty of furniture, electronics, even curtains. The walls were bare rectangles of unfaded paint where family photos had hung. Our bedroom. Just an outline on the carpet where our bed had been. The children's rooms. No beds, no toys, no clothes, nothing but dust bunnies in the corners. I stood in the hallway, turning in a slow circle, trying to process what I was seeing. 12 years of marriage, 2 children, and a home we'd built together, all vanished while I was securing the Baker account in London. That's when I saw it, a manila envelope in the middle of the kitchen counter, the only object in the entire house. My name was written on it in Richard's neat handwriting. With numb fingers, I tore it open. Inside were divorce papers with Richard's signature already on the dotted line, an application for full custody of our children, and a demand for alimony that would bankrupt me. A yellow post-it note stuck to the front page read, "I've had a lawyer for months. You should get one too. The kids are safe with me." I sank to the kitchen floor, the cold tile against my legs, as reality crashed down around me. My husband had planned this, meticulously orchestrated the evacuation of our entire life while I was on the other side of the Atlantic. The precision of his betrayal was breathtaking. A notification pinged on my phone. An email from our joint account, automatically forwarded to me. "Your automatic payment to Springfield Academy has been declined. Please update your payment method." The school. Our children's private school that cost more than most people's mortgages. I'd set up the payments from our joint account, which Richard had apparently emptied. Another notification, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Olivia. This is Mrs. Peterson from next door. Richard asked me to let you know he and the children are safe. He said you'd understand why they had to leave and that his lawyer will be in touch about the rest of your things." The neighbor. The same neighbor who had waved to me just 2 weeks ago as I loaded my suitcase into the taxi, who had smiled knowingly as Richard kissed me goodbye on our front porch. I curled my fingernails into my palms until they left crescent-shaped marks. Through the fog of shock, one crystal-clear thought emerged. This wasn't an impulse. This was calculated, planned, executed with military precision while I was 4,000 miles away, unable to interfere. As I sat on that cold floor, surrounded by the echoing emptiness of what had been my home, something hardened inside me. I reached for the divorce papers again, reading them more carefully this time. The custody application claimed I was an absent mother, prioritizing work over family. The alimony demand was based on Richard's claim that he'd sacrificed his career to raise our children while I built my successful one. The narrative he'd crafted was so carefully constructed, so plausible to anyone who didn't know us intimately. But it was also deeply, fundamentally untrue. I reached for my phone again and opened my camera roll. I scrolled back through photos of recitals I'd attended, soccer games I'd cheered at, family dinners I'd cooked. Evidence that contradicted Richard's carefully crafted story. Then I opened my calendar app, looking at the patterns of my work schedule over the past year, the days I'd worked from home to care for sick kids, the half-days I'd taken for school events, the carefully balanced work-life arrangement we'd agreed upon together. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. I picked myself up off the floor, smoothed my wrinkled business clothes, and walked to the door on unsteady legs. Standing on my porch was Janet, my colleague's wife, holding a small potted plant. "Welcome home," she said with a bright smile that quickly faded as she took in my appearance. "Olivia, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I stepped aside to let her see the empty hallway behind me. "They're gone," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "Richard took the kids, the furniture, everything." While I was away, Janet's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered, stepping inside. "When? How?" "I don't know exactly," I admitted, "but it was planned." Carefully planned. Janet followed me to the kitchen, where the divorce papers still lay spread across the counter. She scanned them quickly, her expression darkening. "This is..." She trailed off, clearly searching for words. Premeditated, I finished for her. "He's trying to take everything, the house, the kids, half my income." Janet's gaze met mine. Unlike the pity I feared I might see, there was steel in her eyes. "You need to call Jason," she said firmly, referring to her husband, my colleague who was also a former corporate attorney. I nodded, feeling the fog of shock starting to lift, replaced by something colder and more focused. "Yes," I agreed. "But first, I need to find my children." My first call wasn't to Jason, though. It was to the Springfield Academy headmistress, a formidable woman named Dr. Winters, with whom I'd served on the fundraising committee for 3 years. "Olivia," she greeted me warmly. "How was London? Did you secure the account?" "I did," I answered automatically. "Dr. Winters, I'm calling about Emma and Jake. Are they in school today?" There was a slight pause. "No, they haven't been in since last Wednesday. Your husband notified us they'd be absent due to a family situation. Is everything all right?" "Wednesday. 5 days ago. While I was sitting in boardrooms, Richard had been pulling our children out of school, packing up our life." "Actually, no," I said, keeping my voice steady with effort. "Richard and I are separating. He's taken the children without my knowledge or consent while I was overseas on business. I'm trying to locate them." Another pause, longer this time. "I see," she said carefully. "That's concerning. Emma mentioned to her teacher last week that they were going on a trip to her grandmother's house. Does that help?" Richard's mother lived in Florida. Retired to Sarasota 5 years ago and spent most of her time criticizing my parenting from a comfortable distance. Of course she'd be involved in this. "It does, thank you," I said. "One more thing. Has Richard submitted any paperwork regarding changes to pickup authorization or emergency contacts? Let me check." I heard keyboard clicks. "Yes, he came in person last Tuesday to update the family information. He removed you as an emergency contact and added his mother instead. Last Tuesday, the day after I'd left for London." "I did not authorize those changes," I said, my voice now tight with controlled anger. "I need you to reinstate me immediately and flag any attempt to remove the children from school by anyone other than me." "Of course," Dr. Winters replied promptly. "Olivia, do you need to involve the authorities in this matter?" The question gave me pause. Did this qualify as kidnapping? They were his children too. But he'd taken them across state lines without my knowledge during a time when he knew I couldn't intervene. "Not yet," I decided. "But I would appreciate your discretion until this situation is resolved." After ending the call, I sat at my empty kitchen counter and formulated a plan. Janet had returned to her house to call Jason, promising he'd be over within the hour. I had that long to get my thoughts in order. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything: the state of the house, the divorce papers, the timing of events as I could piece them together. I took photos of the empty rooms, the changed locks, the single envelope left for me. Then I accessed our bank accounts online. As I suspected, our joint account had been emptied last Tuesday. $24,873 transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Our savings account, which had contained nearly $60,000 for the children's college funds, had been similarly drained. My personal account, thankfully, remained untouched. Richard couldn't access it without my passwords, which I'd never shared with him, a precaution that now seemed almost prescient. Next, I checked our credit card statements. In the weeks leading up to my London trip, there were multiple charges from a storage facility in Northbrook, a suburb about 30 minutes from our home. Richard had been moving things out gradually, I realized, storing them until he could execute the final move while I was away. I found charges for airline tickets to Tampa, dated last Thursday, 1 adult, 2 children, one way. So they were definitely at his mother's. I pulled up property records for Martha Warren, Richard's mother. She owned a condo in a gated community in Sarasota. My hands trembled as I typed, fingers sometimes missing keys entirely. At one point, I spilled my coffee across the keyboard and burst into tears, not for the laptop, but for the absurdity of documenting my own family's disintegration like some corporate project. After wiping the keys with my sleeve, I forced myself to continue, the shaking in my hands gradually subsiding as determination replaced shock. By the time Jason arrived, I had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Richard's actions and whereabouts. I'd also calculated that he'd taken approximately $93,000 in joint assets, not including the value of the furniture and household items. Jason whistled low as he reviewed my findings. He's been planning this for at least 2 months, he concluded. The storage unit rentals started 10 weeks ago, small at first, then increasing. The bank transfers were timed just after you left the country. What about the custody claim? I asked, pointing to the papers. He's saying I'm an absent mother, prioritizing work over the children. Jason frowned. It's a standard tactic, but weak given your actual involvement. Your calendar shows you've never missed an important event. You work from home 2 days a week, and you've taken less business travel than most executives at your level. He's claiming he sacrificed his career to raise them, I said bitterly. He works 30 hours a week by choice, and we have a nanny who comes in daily from 2 to 6. Speaking of which, have you called Louisa? Jason asked, referring to our nanny. I felt a flash of embarrassment that I hadn't thought of this immediately. No, I'll do that now. Louisa answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. Mrs. Warren? Are you back from your trip? Yes, Louisa. I just got home to find the house empty. Can you tell me what happened? A long silence followed. Mr. Warren said you knew, she finally said, her voice small. He said you were divorcing and had agreed he would take the children to stay with his mother while things got settled. That's not true, I said firmly. I had no idea. When did all this happen? He started packing things last Monday, right after you left, she said. He told me not to worry, that this was all planned. By Wednesday, most of the furniture was gone. Thursday morning, he paid me 2 weeks' salary and said they were going to Florida. He said you'd call me when you were ready to make new arrangements. Did Emma and Jake seem upset? I asked, my heart constricting at the thought of my children being uprooted without explanation. Emma was confused, Louisa admitted. She kept asking when you were coming home and if you would meet them in Florida. Jake was excited about seeing his grandmother and going to the beach. Mr. Warren told them it was a surprise vacation. I thanked Louisa and assured her that I'd be in touch about future arrangements. After hanging up, I looked at Jason, who had been listening to my side of the conversation. He lied to everyone, I said flatly. The school, the nanny, probably the neighbors too. Constructed this narrative that I was aware and had agreed to everything. Jason nodded grimly. It's actually smart from a legal perspective. He's established a status quo. He's the primary caregiver who had to relocate due to your mutual decision to separate. By the time you contest it, the children will be settled in a new routine, and courts are reluctant to disrupt children's stability. How quickly can we get an emergency hearing? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Normally it would take days, maybe weeks, Jason admitted, but I have a contact in the family court who owes me a favor. Judge Harmon clerked with me at the beginning of his career. I'll call him directly. We might be able to get on the docket for tomorrow morning. So what do? I asked, fighting to keep the desperation from my voice. First, we file an emergency motion for return of the children to their habitual residence, Jason said, already typing notes on his tablet. We can argue he removed them across state lines without your consent during a time when he knew you couldn't intervene. We document everything about your actual involvement in their lives to counter his absent mother narrative. I nodded, grateful for his quick, methodical approach. Second, he continued, we freeze any remaining joint assets and document what's been taken. We'll need to file financial disclosures anyway as part of the divorce proceedings. And third, Jason looked up from his tablet, his expression grim but determined. Third, we consider whether his actions rise to the level of parental kidnapping or at least custodial interference. If so, we involve law enforcement. The word kidnapping sent a chill through me. This was Richard, my husband of 12 years, the father of my children. How had we arrived at a place where I was contemplating having him arrested? Let's start with the emergency motion, I decided. I don't want to escalate this further than necessary if there's a chance of resolving it without traumatizing Emma and Jake. Jason nodded. I'll have paperwork for you to review by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, secure the house, document everything, and don't contact Richard directly yet. Anything you say to him now could be twisted later. After Jason left, I wandered through the empty house again, taking more detailed photos of each room. In Emma's room, I noticed something I'd missed before, a small stuffed rabbit tucked into the corner of her closet. Mr. Flopsy, her beloved first toy, apparently overlooked in the hasty packing. I held it to my chest, breathing in the faint scent of my daughter's shampoo that still clung to its worn fur. In Jake's room, I found a Lego piece under the radiator and a baseball card that had slipped behind his dresser. Small pieces of my children's lives, left behind like breadcrumbs. In our former bedroom, I opened Richard's closet to find it completely empty except for a shoebox on the top shelf. Inside were old greeting cards I'd given him over the years, photos from our early days together, and, unexpectedly, what looked like a journal. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the leather-bound book. This was private, personal. But so was my home, my children, my life, all of which he had taken without hesitation. I opened the journal. The entries began about 8 months ago, around the time I'd received my promotion to senior IT manager. The early pages were filled with resentment, complaints about my longer hours, my increased salary, the attention I received at company events where he felt sidelined as just the spouse. As I flipped through the pages, the entries grew darker. He wrote about feeling emasculated by my success, about conversations with his mother where she reinforced his belief that a woman's place was primarily in the home. There were references to a men's online forum where he'd found others who validated his grievances. Then, about 3 months ago, the tone shifted. The entries became more calculated, detailing plans for what he called his exit strategy. He consulted with a divorce attorney who specialized in father's rights. He'd begun documenting every business call I took during family time, every school event where I arrived late or left early, building his case for my supposed neglect. There was a detailed inventory of our joint assets and which ones he planned to take. Notes about the best timing, when I would be overseas, unable to interfere. Strategies for gaining sympathy from the school, neighbors, even our children's pediatrician. The final entry was dated the day before I left for London. Everything is in place. Storage unit paid through next month. Movers scheduled for Wednesday. Flights booked for Thursday. Mother has the guest rooms ready. By the time Olivia returns, there will be nothing left but papers to sign. She values her career above all else. In the end, maybe she'll thank me for freeing her from the burden of motherhood she never fully embraced. She's too busy climbing the corporate ladder to fight for the kids. In her heart, she's probably relieved I'm taking this off her hands. I closed the journal, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. This wasn't just betrayal, it was character assassination. Richard had spent months constructing an elaborate fiction about our marriage, our parenting, my priorities, and he'd convinced himself it was true. I took the journal to my home office, the only room with any furniture left, since Richard rarely entered it. I scanned every page, saved the files to multiple locations, and then returned the original to exactly where I'd found it. Evidence, Jason would call it. Ammunition. That night, I slept on the floor of my office, using my coat as a pillow and my carry-on blanket for warmth. In the quiet darkness of my empty house, I allowed myself to feel everything I'd been suppressing all day: rage, betrayal, fear, heartbreak. I cried for my children, confused and manipulated. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I even cried for Richard, so consumed by insecurity and resentment that he'd orchestrated this elaborate deception. By morning, my tears were spent. I woke with swollen eyes, but a clear purpose. As the first light filtered through the curtainless windows, I opened my laptop and began composing emails to my boss explaining I needed emergency family leave, to our family doctor requesting records of my attendance at the children's appointments, to the parents of Emma and Jake's friends seeking statements about my involvement in playdates and school events. Jason arrived at 9 a.m. sharp with a stack of legal documents and a grim determination that matched my own. We spent the morning reviewing and filing the emergency motion for return of the children and freezing the remaining joint assets. "There's something else you should see," I told him, pulling up the scanned journal pages. Jason read through them, his expression darkening with each page. "This is unusually explicit," he said finally. "Most people don't document their own bad faith this comprehensively. Will it help?" I asked. "Absolutely," he confirmed. "This demonstrates premeditation, deception, and most importantly, that his claims about your parenting are fabricated. He knew you were an involved mother. He just resented your career success." By noon, we had filed all the necessary paperwork. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following morning. I had exactly 24 hours to prepare to fight for my children. Jason advised against contacting Richard directly, but there was one call I needed to make. I dialed my mother-in-law's number, putting the phone on speaker so Jason could listen. She answered with a frosty, "I wondered when you'd call." "Martha," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'd like to speak with my children." "They're not available right now," she replied. "They're at the community pool with their father, enjoying some much-needed family time." "I am their family," I said firmly. "And Richard removed them from their home and school without my knowledge while I was out of the country. That's not acceptable." "Oh, Olivia," she sighed dramatically. "Richard told me you'd try to spin this. You've been checked out of this marriage for years, prioritizing your precious career over your family. Richard finally had enough of raising those children practically single-handedly while you jet-set around the world." As she spoke, I could hear a slight waver in her voice, a momentary hesitation that belied her confident words. There was a pause, and I imagined her standing in her Florida condo, perhaps glancing toward a photo of her grandchildren, briefly questioning her role in this scheme. But when she continued, her voice had hardened again, the moment of doubt carefully suppressed. The narrative was so perfectly aligned with Richard's journal entries that I wondered if she'd helped craft it, or if he'd simply been parroting her worldview all along. "That's simply untrue," I replied calmly, "and I have abundant evidence to prove it. We have a court hearing tomorrow morning regarding the immediate return of Emma and Jake to Chicago." There was a slight pause. "A court hearing?" My goodness, you're going to drag those poor children through a legal battle because your pride is wounded? How typically selfish. This isn't about pride, Martha. It's about my children being taken across state lines without my knowledge or consent, which is potentially a federal offense. Now, I'll ask once more, may I please speak with Emma and Jake when they return from the pool? Another pause. I'll have Richard call you when they get back. She finally conceded, though her tone suggested she had no intention of following through. After hanging up, I looked at Jason, who nodded approvingly. You handled that perfectly, he said. You stated the facts, didn't make threats, and created a record of attempting to communicate with your children. She's not going to have Richard call me back, I said with certainty. I know, Jason agreed. But now we have documentation that they're deliberately withholding the children from communication with their mother. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. I collected and organized evidence of my involvement in my children's lives, photos, emails from teachers praising my participation, calendar entries showing my attendance at school events, testimonials from other parents about my active role in the children's activities. By evening, I had assembled a compelling counter-narrative to Richard's claims. I was not an absent mother, but an engaged, loving parent who balanced career and family with great care, often at significant personal cost. I was reviewing my presentation for the judge one final time when my phone rang. An unknown Florida number. I answered immediately. Mom? Emma's voice, small and uncertain, came through the speaker. Emma, sweetheart. I exclaimed, relief washing over me. I've missed you so much. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay, she said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. We're at Grandma's house. Dad says we're going to live here now because you're too busy with work to take care of us. The words struck like physical blows. That's not true, Emma, I said gently. I love you and Jake more than anything in the world. There's nothing more important to me than being your mom. Then why aren't you here? She asked, her voice wobbling. Because Dad took you to Florida while I was on my business trip, I explained, trying to keep my tone neutral. I didn't know you were going. I came home yesterday expecting to see you, and you were gone. Oh, she said, confusion evident in her voice. Dad said you knew. He said you were okay with us moving. No, sweetheart, that's not what happened, I said carefully. I'm coming to Florida tomorrow to see you and Jake. The judge is going to help us figure everything out. We're going to see a judge? Emma sounded alarmed. Like when people get arrested? No, nothing like that, I assured her. Sometimes when grown-ups disagree about important things like where children should live, a judge helps make sure everyone is treated fairly. It's their job to listen to both sides and decide what's best for the children. There was a muffled sound in the background, then Emma's voice, distant now, it's Mom. She says she's coming here tomorrow. I heard Richard's voice, too faint to make out the words, then Emma again. I have to go, Mom. Dad says it's dinner time. Emma, wait, I began, but the line went dead. I stared at the phone, emotion welling up in my throat. Richard was already poisoning the children against me, constructing a reality where I had willingly abandoned them. But I'd heard the doubt in Emma's voice when she relayed what her father had told her. She was 10 years old enough to sense inconsistencies in the narrative she was being fed. I called Jason immediately to report the conversation. This is good, he assured me. You now have direct evidence that Richard is making false statements to the children about your awareness and consent. And the fact that Emma called you shows she's seeking your side of the story. I'm worried about what he's telling them, I admitted. Emma sounded confused, maybe even a little scared. That's why the emergency hearing is so crucial, Jason said. We need to establish temporary custody and visitation guidelines immediately to prevent further parental alienation. I barely slept that night, lying on my office floor, replaying Emma's voice in my head. By 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and began preparing for the day ahead. I showered, put on my most professional outfit, and packed a small bag with essentials for the trip to Florida I hoped to be making by afternoon. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. Jason picked me up at 8:30, giving us time to review our strategy once more before facing the judge. We had arranged for Janet to testify about my parenting via video conference, along with Dr. Winters from the school and Louisa, our nanny. All three would directly contradict Richard's claims about my parental involvement. We arrived at the courthouse to find an unexpected surprise. Richard was there in person, standing in the hallway with his attorney, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit. No sign of his mother or the children. Our eyes met across the corridor. For a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. Perhaps he'd expected me to crumble, to be so devastated by his actions that I'd simply concede to his demands. Instead, I stood tall, my expression composed, a leather portfolio containing all the evidence of his deception tucked under my arm. "Olivia," he nodded stiffly. "Richard," I replied, my voice cool. "I'm surprised to see you here. Who's watching Emma and Jake?" "My mother, of course," he said. "They're perfectly well cared for. Unlike when they're with me?" I countered quietly. "According to your custody petition, I'm an absent, career-obsessed mother who prioritizes work over her children." He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I didn't want it to come to this," he claimed. "If you'd been more present in our marriage—" "Save it for the judge," I interrupted. "I have your journal, Richard. Every page where you detailed your exit strategy. Every admission that you were building a false narrative about my parenting. Every step of your plan to abduct our children while I was overseas." The color drained from his face. "You had no right to read that," he hissed. "You had no right to take my children," I replied evenly. "Or empty our bank accounts. Or remove every trace of me from their lives." His attorney placed a warning hand on his arm, murmuring something in his ear. Richard straightened his tie, composing himself. "We'll see what the judge has to say," he said with forced confidence before turning away. The hearing itself was mercifully brief but intense. Richard's attorney presented their narrative first. A dedicated stay-at-home father forced to relocate with the children when his career-obsessed wife prioritized work over family. They had selected a sympathetic-looking older male judge, likely hoping he'd respond to traditional gender role arguments. But they hadn't counted on the overwhelming evidence we presented. Jason methodically dismantled their claims with documentation of my extensive involvement in the children's lives, testimony from school officials and our nanny, and, most damning of all, excerpts from Richard's own journal detailing his deliberate campaign to create a false narrative. When the judge questioned Richard directly about removing the children from their school and home while I was overseas on business, Richard stammered through an unconvincing explanation about timing issues and wanting to minimize disruption. "So you thought it would be less disruptive for your children to be uprooted from their home, school, and community without warning and without their mother present to help them process this change?" the judge asked pointedly. Richard had no good answer. The judge's ruling came swiftly. The children were to be returned to Chicago immediately, with both parents sharing temporary joint custody until a more permanent arrangement could be determined. Richard was ordered to provide a full accounting of all marital assets removed from the home and from joint accounts. The judge also issued a stern warning about parental alienation, noting that any parent who deliberately turned the children against the other would be viewed unfavorably in future custody determinations. As we left the courtroom, I caught Richard's eye again. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by something closer to shock. He had been so certain of his plan, so convinced of his narrative, that he couldn't process its collapse. "I'll be flying to Sarasota this afternoon to bring Emma and Jake home," I told him calmly. "I expect your full cooperation in explaining to them that what you told them about me was untrue." He nodded mutely, the fight suddenly gone out of him. Jason drove me home to collect my overnight bag before taking me to the airport. "This is just the beginning," he warned me. "The divorce proceedings could get ugly, especially once Richard recovers from today's setback." "I know," I acknowledged. "But today we established the truth, and that's what matters most. My children will know that I never abandoned them, never chose work over them, never stopped fighting for them. On the plane to Florida, I had time to reflect on the whirlwind of the past 48 hours. The shock of coming home to an empty house. The rage at Richard's calculated betrayal. The fear of losing my children. The strange grief for a marriage that I now realized had been unraveling for longer than I'd known. But beneath all those emotions was something unexpected, a sense of clarity. Richard's attempt to destroy me had instead revealed my strength. His attempt to erase me from our children's lives had only highlighted how essential I was to them. His attempt to punish me for my success had shown how deeply insecure he truly was. As the plane began its descent into Sarasota, I thought about the empty house waiting for me back in Chicago. It would need new furniture, new photos on the walls, new memories to replace those that had been taken. But it would no longer be filled with resentment and secret plotting. It would be honest. Real. I knew we had a long road ahead. Emma and Jake would need therapy to process this trauma. There would be difficult conversations about why Dad left, why he lied, and how our family would function now. The financial recovery would take months, maybe years. Richard and I would need to learn to co-parent without the bitterness consuming everyone. But for the first time since walking into that empty house, I felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The house was empty, but I was not. And soon, it would be filled again with the voices of my children, not as possessions to be fought over, but as people to be cherished, protected, and raised with love by both their parents, however our new arrangement took shape. The plane touched down, and I switched my phone off airplane mode to find a text from an unknown number, Richard's mother's phone. Emma and Jake packed and ready. They're excited to see you. We'll be waiting at the main gate. My heart leapt. Perhaps there was hope for civility after all. As I made my way through the terminal, I rehearsed what I would say to my children, how I would reassure them without disparaging their father, how I would help them understand the changes ahead without burdening them with adult complexities. But when I stepped outside into the Florida sunshine, all my carefully planned words evaporated. Because there they were. Emma with her wild curls and gap-toothed smile, Jake bouncing on his toes with uncontainable energy. And when they spotted me, their faces lit up with pure joy. Mom, they cried in unison, breaking away from their grandmother to run toward me. I knelt down, arms open wide, as they crashed into me with the force of their love. As I held them close, I could feel the tension in their small bodies. Emma gripped my hand with trembling fingers, while Jake kept looking over his shoulder toward his grandmother, as if uncertain who was in charge now. Their emotions were a complicated tangle that would take time to unravel, but beneath it all was the undeniable current of relief at seeing me again. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the divorce papers, not the emptied bank accounts, not the bare walls of our home. My house was empty, but my heart was full, and that was everything. Was I right to fight so hard when my husband tried to erase me from my children's lives? Would you have taken a gentler approach, or gone even further to protect your family? I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you would have done in my shoes.